In a quiet American suburb where the nights were long and the streets seemed safe and ordinary, there lived a woman named Sarah Mitchell, a single mother who worked 2 jobs and still found time to take care of her daughter. Her life was simple and predictable, yet filled with a quiet strength that nobody truly saw, or perhaps nobody noticed, until the moment the world around her began to shift in unsettling ways. Every evening when she returned home after a long shift, she would sit by her window while her daughter finished homework or watched television. Sarah enjoyed the soft hush of the night, the glow of streetlights, the calm silence, but one evening she noticed something that did not belong in the peaceful rhythm of her street. A car stopped outside a house across from hers, the engine running, the lights dimmed, and then a young girl stepped out. She looked lost, scared, confused. Sarah watched as the door opened and a man ushered the girl inside, then the car sped away. At first Sarah told herself it was nothing, perhaps a family member, perhaps a visitor, perhaps she was imagining the fear she had seen on the girl's face, but the image stayed with her throughout the night. When she lay in bed, she could not shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Days passed, then weeks, and the pattern continued. More cars would come late at night, never the same ones, always stopping for just a few minutes, always dropping off a young girl who never seemed to leave the house again. Each girl looked different, but all of them had the same hollow expression, the same defeated slump of the shoulders, the same trapped energy of someone who had nowhere else to go. Sarah tried to tell herself she was overthinking, but her instincts whispered otherwise. Something inside her stirred, something brave, something protective, something fierce, like a quiet flame beginning to grow. She started watching more carefully. She sat by the window longer. She noted the times the cars came. She observed the men who arrived and left quickly, men she had never seen in the neighborhood before. They seemed impatient, as if they were on a schedule. They moved with a kind of practiced secrecy, looking around before knocking on the door. The door would open just enough to let them in, then close just as fast. Sarah felt a chill every time. One night, as the moon hung low and pale, she heard a faint noise. It was soft, a muffled cry carried through the stillness of the street. Sarah froze, her heart thudded in her chest. She leaned closer to the window, listening. The cry came again, this time clearer, a sound filled with pain and fear. Sarah knew something was happening in that house, something no one else wanted to see or face. But she could not look away, she could not pretend, she could not be the kind of person who stays silent when someone is suffering. The next morning she walked to the house, pretending to take out the trash, trying to catch a glimpse through the windows, but the shades were always shut, the curtains thick and heavy. She saw the silhouette of a man inside, thin and tall, his posture cold and rigid. He turned slightly and she stepped back, afraid she had been seen, but the moment passed. Sarah returned home shaken but certain. Now something dark was happening there, something too big for her to ignore. She had no training, she had no badge, no authority. She was just a mother trying to protect her daughter and her neighborhood, but the flame inside her was growing. Bravery often begins exactly like that, not loud, not dramatic, simply a quiet decision to pay attention when no one else does. The following week she began keeping a notebook. She wrote down the times the cars arrived, the colors, the make, the people who stepped out. She memorized details, the direction they came from, the direction they left, the way the girls walked, as if their legs were heavy with fear. Her daughter asked one night, "Mom, why do you keep looking outside like that?" And Sarah simply answered, "I am just making sure everything is okay." As the days went on, Sarah found herself obsessed with the truth that no one else seemed to notice. She researched online about the signs of human trafficking. She compared them with what she saw outside her window. And with each checkmark, her heart sank deeper. She realized she was witnessing something dangerous, something horrifying, something that could destroy the lives of innocent girls whose voices were trapped in silence. One night she gathered the courage to drive after one of the cars. The moment the car left the house, she grabbed her keys and followed from a distance. Her palms were sweating, her breath shaky. But she kept going. She reminded herself that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. The car drove toward the edge of the city, winding through back roads and industrial areas. Sarah stayed far behind, but close enough not to lose them. She felt foolish for doing something so risky. But something inside her pushed her forward. The car eventually pulled into a warehouse district, a place dark and quiet, except for the hum of machinery. Sarah saw the girl from her neighborhood house being led into a door on the side of the building. Her heart broke. She drove home in silence, knowing now without any doubt that she could not stay silent anymore. She needed help, she needed someone to listen, she needed the authorities to step in. But when she went to the police station the next day, the reaction she received was not what she expected. She told the officer everything she had seen. She handed over her notebook filled with observations, dates, times, plates, descriptions. But the officer glanced at the pages and shrugged, saying, "We get calls like this all the time. Sometimes it is nothing, sometimes it is just a misunderstanding. Are you sure you are not misreading the situation?" Sarah felt her stomach twist. She had expected concern, urgency. She had expected someone to believe her, someone to act, but all she felt was dismissal. She tried again to explain the fear in the girl's eyes, the late-night drop-offs, the cries she had heard. The officer nodded politely and told her they would look into it. Sarah left the station feeling defeated, yet something inside her refused to give up. She could not simply walk away, she could not let her fear be louder than her compassion. So she continued watching, she continued documenting, she continued following. She even installed a small camera in her window facing the suspicious house, recording every car that stopped at night, every figure that entered, every girl left behind. Weeks passed and the activity grew worse. More cars, more men, more girls. She saw younger ones, now some barely teenagers. Her heart ached for them. She wanted to shout to the world that something terrible was happening in her own neighborhood. She wanted someone to see what she saw, she wanted someone to care. One evening while recording, she saw a girl stumble out of a car and collapse onto the ground. The man dragged her toward the door. She struggled weakly. Sarah felt tears well in her eyes. She grabbed her phone. She called the police again this time. Her voice was trembling with urgency. When the officers arrived, they knocked on the door, but the house remained silent. They left after a few minutes, saying they could not force entry without evidence. Sarah felt powerless, angry, determined. She knew she had evidence, she had recordings, she had logs, she had photographs. So she gathered everything, printed images, organized her notes, compiled the videos, and returned to the police station again. Her hands trembled as she placed the folder on the desk of the same officer. This time the officer stared at the evidence longer. Something in his eyes shifted. He looked at the pictures, the videos, the expressions of the terrified girls. He realized this was not a misunderstanding, this was real, this was urgent. He excused himself and spoke to a superior. Moments later, more officers arrived. They questioned her, they listened carefully, they reviewed her records, they thanked her for her persistence. Within days, a task force was formed. Surveillance began. Investigators monitored the comings and goings at the house. They examined the warehouse she had followed the car to. They pieced together a network far larger than Sarah had imagined. This was not a small operation, this was a trafficking ring that stretched across multiple cities, using suburban houses like hers as silent hubs. Then one night, long after midnight, police cars lined the street, their lights flashing silently. Officers in tactical gear surrounded the house. Sarah watched from her window, her heart pounding as tears filled her eyes, not out of fear but out of hope that the girls inside would finally be free. When the police raided the house, they found 14 girls inside, 14 frightened, broken girls, some barely 12 years old, locked in rooms, forced into lives they never chose. The officers who entered said the house felt like a place where hope had been strangled. At the same time, raids occurred across the city. Multiple victims were rescued, men were arrested, the ring was dismantled. Sarah became a quiet hero, though she never asked for recognition. Her bravery had sparked the investigation, her persistence had saved lives, her courage had changed the fate of girls she had never met but cared for deeply. In the days that followed, the rescued girls were placed in safe shelters. They received medical help, psychological support, a chance to rebuild their lives. Many of them expressed gratitude for the unknown woman who refused to remain silent. Sarah visited the police station again, and the officers thanked her sincerely. Some even apologized for not believing her sooner, but Sarah was not angry. She was simply relieved that the girls were safe, relieved that the nightmare across the street was finally over, relieved that she had listened to her instincts even when doubt tried to silence her. At home, she hugged her daughter tightly, feeling the weight of the journey they had unknowingly walked together. She realized that courage does not come from being fearless. Courage comes from caring deeply, from refusing to turn away from suffering, from choosing love over comfort, from choosing action over silence. For months afterwards, Sarah struggled with the memories of what she had seen, the screams she had heard, the fear in the eyes of the girls. But with time, she found peace, knowing that some nights change the world, even if they begin quietly, with a simple feeling that something is wrong. Her story spread throughout the town, then the state, then across the nation. People were inspired by the woman who had no training, no authority, no special skills, but who had the heart to take a stand when no one else would. She received messages from survivors, from families, from law enforcement officers who had seen too much darkness in their careers. They told her that her bravery reminded them of the power of a single voice. In interviews, she always said one thing: I am not a hero. I am just someone who could not ignore suffering. But the truth is that heroes often say that because real bravery rarely recognizes itself. Real bravery simply does what needs to be done. Years later, whenever Sarah walked down her street, she still felt the haunting echoes of the past. But she also felt a strong sense of pride in the knowledge that even the quietest person can shine a light bright enough to break through the deepest shadows. And though the house was eventually sold and remodeled, the memory of what once happened there never truly faded. Yet that memory no longer carried fear, instead it carried hope, a reminder of what can happen when one woman chooses to see, when one woman chooses to act, when one woman chooses to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. And somewhere out there, the girls she helped save, now grown stronger, braver, more whole, carry with them a piece of her courage. They carry her name in their hearts, Even if they never met her face to face, they carry the proof that one stranger with kindness can change the world. Sarah continued her life as a mother, a worker, a neighbor. Yet she carried with her the everlasting truth that when we listen to our instincts, when we protect one another, when we open our eyes and refuse to remain silent, we become powerful beyond measure. We become the shield someone desperately needs. We become the one light in a darkness that thought it could hide forever. And so her story continues, not in grand monuments or loud celebrations, but in the quiet strength she inspired in others, the strength to pay attention, the strength to care, the strength to protect. And perhaps somewhere tonight, as the streetlights glow and the night settles softly, another woman somewhere in the world might glance out her window, notice something wrong, feel that same whisper in her heart, a whisper of courage, a whisper that says, look closer, pay attention, do not turn away. And because of Sarah Mitchell, that whisper might be just a little louder, just